Technology is already. Okay. We call this July 13th, 2023 meeting of the AMAS Technical Advisory Committee. John, could you do the roll call for us?
Certainly. Mr. Coy?
Here.
Mr. White?
Here.
Ms. Kohlhaas?
Here.
Good, right. Mr. Stitchich?
Participating online.
Mr. Lyon?
Here.
Mr. Rudolph sitting in for Ms. Acton.
Here.
And Ms. Duper sitting in for Brian Lindemann.
Here.
Mr. Boland?
Here.
Mr. Alimi? And Mr. Rapuse.
Here.
So we have a quorum.
Public involvement announcement.
Absolutely. So the AMATS committee meetings are open to the public, and the public is provided an opportunity to comment at each meeting. Business items are presented by staff or consultants. After the committee discusses the business item, the public is invited to formally comment. Each participant will have 3 minutes to speak on their topic. A couple of housekeeping items. If you're joining us virtually and you are not a member of the committee, please turn off your camera when you are not speaking on an item. And if you are joining us by phone, remember to mute and unmute the microphone, press *6.
Okay, thank you, John. Let the record show Mr. Alimi arrived at 2:32. And also, I should point out that Karen Young-Mellon, who usually is the staff person directing this or leading this, assisting with this meeting, is not here today, so John Cecil is filling for him. So thank you, John, for doing that.
You're welcome.
The first item now is to move on to the approval of the agenda. Do we have a motion?
Move to approve.
Okay, moved by Mr. Rudolph. Second by Mr. Alimi. Do we have any changes to the agenda? I'm familiar with one.
I would like to motion to change the agenda to add space for a presentation for the pilot of the protected bike lane project.
Okay, so that would become item 6B. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Moved by Ms. Kohlhaas, seconded by Mr. Rapuse. Are there any objections to adding this presentation?
I just want to make sure, are we going to have the same presentation at the policy committee?
That is a good question.
Okay, because I'm assuming that there are members of the public who might be interested in it, and we should definitely have it at the policy committee as well, so that folks can have a chance to hear
Okay, I think that's a great idea. John, is that easy? I guess we're still far enough out that it can be added
I think so.
to the
Yeah,
agenda.
that shouldn't be a problem.
Okay, sounds good. Any other questions, comments? Okay, any objections? Okay, hearing none. Item 6B, pilot of protected bike lane Anchorage is added to the agenda. Now moving on to the main motion of the agenda. Are there any other changes? Are there any objections to approving the agenda as amended? Okay, hearing none, the agenda is approved. Now we will move on to the meeting minutes approval. We have meeting minutes from June 8, 2023, so that was our last meeting. We have a motion for approving those minutes.
So approve.
Okay, moved by Mr. Alimi, second by Mr. Boland. Do we have any changes? Do we see any changes that we need to make to that?
I believe it's a change. James would probably know for sure. On page 2, under approval of the agenda, it shows he, and on the second sentence, everybody says he requested to add the SURSA funding. I believe there should be a second A there later on in the minutes. It talks about those funds and it has 2 A's, so it does have 2 A's. Okay. So even a blind squirrel is right occasionally. So on page 2, under 3, approval of the agenda, should have a second A under the SRSA funding.
Okay. Let's see, so second A on the search up. Any other changes that others have seen? Did you have something?
Jim Starzak brought up one thing that he provided in that meeting, and I don't know, can I defer to James to, if there's any edits that you want on the record?
James Starzak, DOT Planning. I do have a comment listed, I believe on page 3. It's got my name on it. We're speaking on the SRSA funding. Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. So that would be page 5. There's a comment there that the Tudor and Northern Lights corridor plans will have MOA match sources. That's incorrect. Those two would be DOT and PF match sources.
Okay.
Now, all the projects Mr. Young and Allen listed, I can't speak to that, but of the two Tudor and Northern Lights corridor plans, those are DOT.
Okay. Would someone like to make a motion to amend the minutes with the 2 items that have been brought to my attention?
So moved.
Second.
Then moved by Mr. Bowen, seconded by Mr. Lyon. And that includes changing on this page 5 where it says MOA match sources to say DOT match sources. And then adding an A early on to SRSA. Are there any objections to making those changes to the minutes? Okay, hearing none, those changes are approved. Any other changes, questions? Okay, are there any objections to approving the minutes as amended? Hearing none, the June 8th, 2023 minutes as amended are approved. Let's move on to agenda item 5A, the UPWP 2023 update for Reconnecting Communities grant. Is that one that you'll be leading us on, John?
Yes, thank you. So item 5A of your agenda this afternoon relates to the 2022-2023 Unified Planning Work Program. And that work program is required under federal law under Title 23 Code of Federal Regulations 450.308. And NeighborWorks, Alaska has received a Reconnecting Community Grant that must be included in the AMATS UPWP. The AMATS Policy Committee approved adding the following language to the 2024-2025 UPWP narrative on page 10. And that narrative follows in the staff memo that Aaron provided you. I'm not going to read that unless absolutely if you would like me to, but this language also needs to be added to the 2022-2023 UPWP to ensure the recipient, NeighborWorks, can receive the funding in FY. So the recommendation, that is the recommendation staff is asking the Technical Advisory Committee to review the edit to the 2022-23 UPWP narrative and recommend approval to the Policy Committee.
Okay, thank you, John. Appreciate that update. Are there any questions or comments from the committee? I think we saw this had come forth last, like you said, the 2024-25. Seems more, housekeeping, I guess, to add this in. So thank you for that update. Are there any questions, or I guess, are there any comments from the public on this item? Nothing online? No one in the room? Okay, what is the will of the committee?
Oh, Brad, I don't think we have a motion yet, but this is Matt Stichik. I'll move that we add the suggested language to page 10 of the current UPWP and forward it to the policy committee for approval.
Moved by Mr. Stichik. Do you have a second? Second by Mr. Alimi to recommend the addition of this language and forward it to the policy committee. Are there any objections to approving the motion? Okay, hearing none, the motion is approved. Thank you, Matt, for making that motion, and everyone. Let's move on to the next item, item 5B, Alaska DOT&F carbon reduction strategy. Is that yours as well?
That is me again, yes.
Okay.
So item 5B of your agenda relates, as Chairman Coy noted, the DOT is developing carbon reduction strategies under the carbon reduction program. This project outlines the following bipartisan infrastructure law carbon reduction program as outlined in the fact sheet in the Federal Highway Administration. Let's see. As part of this effort, DOT is reaching out to the NPOs in the state to introduce the plan, purpose, and receive any preliminary input. So this is an opportunity to give the Technical Advisory Committee a heads up to think about this. This item, DOT is asking AMATS to review the following questions and provide any feedback. In the Anchorage metro area, what specific concerns do you have? Do you have any preliminary ideas on strategies to reduce carbon emissions in the area? What strategies would be most effective in this area? What public outreach would you suggest for the area, and what types of projects would you suggest? And then I believe there should be some representatives from DOT who would like to talk about this particular item on the agenda. So, if you'd like to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Sure, thank you. My name is Teresa Buchek. I am an environmental specialist at Dow.
I'm Adam Morrill. I'm also an environmental specialist at Dow. We've been contracted by DOT to work on this project.
So we have prepared a slide deck to go through for everybody, and we will be presenting our work thus far on the carbon reduction strategy and kind of where the process is. So next slide, please. So as an overview of the carbon reduction program, the bipartisan infrastructure law, as everyone knows, was signed into law on November 15th of 2021 and included the carbon reduction program, requiring a carbon reduction strategy to be drafted within 2 years of the signing of that law. Following down the time frame there, in September of 2022, DOT STIP. So we've spent the last few months, we were contracted to do this work April of 2023, and we've spent the last few months coordinating a team of greenhouse gas technical experts, identifying proposed strategies, preparing an evaluation of the carbon reduction benefits of some of the strategies, and reviewing some of the projects that have been preliminarily proposed for CRP funding, as well as drafting the strategy along the way. One of the data gaps that we have is NPO outreach and NPO input. So that is what we're conducting today and in 2 weeks from now at the next meeting. We expect to have a draft carbon reduction strategy in September of this year. And that will go out for 30-day public review and stakeholder review and NPO review. And then the final strategy, we are hoping to have a final completed mid-October in advance of that November 15th, 2023 pass deadline with FHWA. Moving into the future, once the strategy is complete, MPOs and DOTs will start identifying projects that meet the funding requirements and hopefully are work within the strategy. And then after that, the strategy has to be updated every 4 years. That is part of the future at this point. Next slide. So there are 4 types of projects identified in the carbon reduction program that are eligible for funding. The project types largely fall into 4 construction or design and construction categories and then 1 planning category. The top 4 bullets on that list are the overarching strategies that we're proposing, and then the smaller text are the project types that we have identified as suitable for meeting the strategies. So the overarching strategies, as you can see, are transportation alternatives and complete streets, congestion management and technology solutions, energy consumption reduction, and construction practices. I will note that some of the preliminary project types on this list, such as HOV lanes or ramp metering, may not be perfectly applicable or suitable to Alaska. So this is our preliminary reviewing all the project types. In order to have a data-driven strategy, we are in the process of calculating carbon emission reductions from hypothetical projects, project types rather, in order to gauge the benefit of each strategy or project type. It's our goal to discuss the strategies and project types with some degree of regionality. Alaska is very large, so we aspire to describe how some strategies may be better in different locations in Alaska. Some communities may have higher EV adoption rates and may be better candidates for charging stations, things such as that. It's not clear to what degree we'll be able to get into that regionality, but we are going to try with the time remaining that we have. Next slide, please. So the carbon reduction program has some requirements and some goals that are rather intuitive, but I'll go through them. A requirement is that the strategy supports efforts and identifies projects and strategies to support the reduction of transportation emissions. This is a good moment for me to point out that this carbon reduction program is specific to on-road vehicle carbon dioxide emissions. Another requirement is also at the state's discretion, is to quantify the total carbon emissions from production, transport, and the use of materials used in construction of state transportation facilities. The last requirement is for the strategy to be appropriate to the population density and context of the state, including MPOs designated within the state. 3 goals that are also very intuitive. A goal is to reduce single occupant vehicle trips, facilitate the use of vehicles or modes of travel that result in lower emissions, and facilitate approaches to construction that result in lower emissions. So these are presented in the program itself.
So on here shows the transportation context here in the state. We have the on-road, which is in blue, the marine that's in black, aviation are the orange dots, and then rail and other transportation is in yellow. We've got roughly 12,000 vehicle mile lanes within the state. And of that, there's about 1,100 miles of interstate. There's 30 communities that are connected through the Marine Highway, and that's about 3,500 miles worth of coastline that system goes through. And as many of you know, about 82% of the communities within Alaska are not accessible by road system. And so that's one of the things that we're looking at in the strategy to help tailor it to Alaska, is to identify some of these differences that we have than some of the other states that are doing the same planning. Go on to the next slide. The Energy Information Administration takes care of a lot of the housekeeping or data collected on CO2 emissions throughout the nation and here in Alaska. And in 2020, the largest contributors here in Alaska are industrial and transportation. So industrial's at almost 50%, transportation's at 33%, and then we have commercial, electric, and residential, all with a portion 5 to 8%. And then getting into the specific transportation, we have aviation that takes up a large part of what is out there. It's roughly 72%. And then the on-road, which this carbon reduction strategy is targeting, is at 27%. Some marine facilities are also included within the carbon reduction program. we're getting into some of that language to see how that's tied in. And then there's a little bit there with rail and other transportation segments. That was 2015 data, and we're looking to update that to 2020 data. And then this next page is what we anticipate to be allocated over the 2022 to 2026 time period. So about 82 million to the state of Alaska, 29 million to the metropolitan areas, and that's AMATS and FAST. Small urban and rural areas are at 24 million. So the money that's allocated in the program is going to be divided up through the state based on population, as Teresa mentioned earlier. And then there's about 29 million that will be able to be used statewide, and it's not specific to MPO or population size. One of the things about this too is these are just preliminary calculations and estimates. We know that the Mat-Su Valley is looking to put an MPO together, and so the small urban and rural areas and the metropolitan planning areas, those numbers will adjust once that comes into play. Next slide. And then this is the STIP allocations that DOT has put money towards for each of the MPOs and the statewide use. So a lot of these for last year and this year for projects that are already in the works, and the future funds 2024, 2025, and 26 are yet to be established. So next slide.
So moving on to a more detailed task schedule to show everyone, where we are today and how we're going to reach that November 15th HWA approval. In order to satisfy the funding requirements, the carbon reduction strategy needs to be approved by November 15th of this year. This task schedule shows where we are. As noted before, we're kind of in the data discovery portion of this process. We've conducted 2 meetings with FAST Planning in May, and we're undertaking the meetings with AMATS right now. We've reached out to the Mat-Su Planning and are working to coordinate meetings with them, but we do not have any on the books as of yet. Next up in this detailed timeline is that the draft plan will be published September 1st. We are hoping by the beginning of September at any rate. 30 days for public comment, where we'll have outreach efforts during that time. And then we'll incorporate all the comments that we've received during that 30-day outreach to prepare a final strategy with DOT October 23rd of this year. And so that will be submitted in advance of the required submission date of November 15th. Next slide. So the last slide here is some questions that we have for AMATS. What would be beneficial specifically are we missing any project types? Are we missing any strategies in terms of carbon emission reduction? And which strategies do you think best suit your service area? So in addition to the questions on the slide, those are some highlights that we will be looking forward to hear back from AMATS on.
Any projects, specific projects. One thing that we got from FAST that was helpful is a list of projects that you have allocated towards CRP funding, or if you look that far ahead, so that we could maybe do some carbon emission calculations as our examples.
So yeah, we want to be sure that not only does our strategy provide a holistic approach for reducing carbon emissions in Alaska, but we also understand some preliminary projects have been proposed. So we want to make sure that those are syncing up with the strategy as well. Next slide. Thank you very much. And the contact information on here is for myself and Judy Chapman, and we do have a story map at the website linked right there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any questions or comments from the committee?
Yeah, this is Abiyami for DC. Although around the most model for the EPA's on-road model definitions for pollutants. And I am the resident expert on PM10, PM2.5, CO, and the transportation and general conformity stocks, but I'm not the resident expert for greenhouse gas. So I invited my colleague, who is the expert for the EC, is on the call right now. He's going to provide some inputs, and it's time for public to speak. But I just want to, before then, I just want to, put in one or two cents on strategy. I think the first is a reduction of the total fuel consumption of on-road vehicles, through the congestion mitigation. It's a very good strategy. I also have the shift to more fuel efficient transportation modes, like the transit, the walking, and non-motorized modes. And the second thing is the BMT reduction of on-road vehicles by reducing the total number and the length of vehicle miles. Yeah, the MOA transit director gave a presentation. I think it was May 18, I can recall very well. The van pooling and the share wrap program was according to, judging by the data given, there was a 6.2 million reduction in vehicle miles, according to him, and a bit of 4.98 million CO2, or 4.98 million pounds of CO2 was reduced, and that's about 2,250 metric tons. I think, incorporating the pooling and the share ride program might go a long way, reducing the carbon dioxide, the carbon burnt. So, if 93 van pools could achieve that, one wonders what we could achieve if we have more than that. The top strategy that I'm thinking of course, switch to low or zero emission fuels, like the use of electric vehicles, could reduce carbon print as well. The only problem I have with this is because some of the disadvantaged communities are not be able to afford the EVs. So in terms of equity consideration, this might not be very visible. So I think these are the highlights of all the strategies I have. Like I said, my colleague who is on the call will provide some more input to this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Lee. Other questions or comments from committee members?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mike.
Thank you. I was going to echo the same thing. Our van pool program has been quite successful, and how that's funded right now is with CMAQ money. But basically, we provide a subsidy to a van pool, and it's operated by a third party. But increasing that subsidy would help expand that program, as well as offering it more broadly to the Mt. Valley for people commuting in, as well as Girdwood. As well as switching people from their single occupancy vehicle to public transit is the obvious solution. How it's funded with CRP could be a little creative, but I know Anchorage will be unique in that when you look at the statewide perspective. But it'd be nice to have some transit strategies on how to make transit more competitive with the automobile. That's really the key to get people to switch out of their car and onto transit. And one way to do that is like transit signal preemption, funding projects like that, if that could be looked at. And then I had a question, because AMATS has already programmed their CRP money, how does that work when you're developing the strategy after the fact?
So we see that we are following behind some work that's already been done. And also has, projects programmed. DOT has some ideas for programming their money. And so we are drafting a strategy from an objective perspective to identify and recommend strategies that are most effective throughout the state. However, we do understand that it needs to sync up to the degree possible with the projects that are already programmed.
Okay, thank you, Bart. Any other committee questions or comments? Go ahead, Melinda.
So the industrial category, which is about 50% of the contribution, it'd be nice to have some examples. I'm sure as you develop it, we could read through it, we can dig into it and find out, well, what are those examples so that we can contemplate ways of reduction, especially since it is such a large category of that contribution. So I'd be interested to hear more about that, especially knowing in Alaska, you know, our industry is, it's a valuable part of our economy. So, you know, as far as production, we don't know how much, what are those elements? I'd like to know more about that eventually. I guess I have a creative idea. I saw somewhere in a letter to an editor about fast food drive-throughs. And, you know, perhaps there could be something that could incentivize a company to minimize or eliminate or something. So, you know, it's a trend where we want things fast. We want to be comfortable and we don't want to get out of our car. But nonetheless, while we're sitting there at Sonic for 25 minutes with my car running, I'm not doing the environment a favor. So some ideas, just creative thinking. I think lastly, I'm still curious why the emission testing went away. I don't know if that's just to say modern cars, there's not much more you can do with a catalytic converter and trying to go after the real minimal older cars is kind of fruitless, but it might be worth just explaining that for the general public. Thank you, Brad.
Okay. Other committee questions or comments? I'll jump in. I've got a few things that I was wondering about. The aviation number, which is so large, how is that calculated when it comes to the trips into and out of Anchorage that are like going worldwide? Is that part of this, or is this just trips like to the local communities, or?
So the large majority of the aviation is the commercial freight that comes in and out of the state. There's a small portion that is directly linked to the communities, and a portion of that is also commercial that goes to the communities. So it's probably like 5% of the aviation is just directly to communities for transportation use and for getting goods to them. The rest of it is largely the international and other cargo that comes through here.
Okay, I know that that's been a huge boon on the economy and something that is being encouraged and bringing, you know, jobs and money. So I'm curious about like strategies that can reduce emissions but still like benefit the economy and the impacts like that has, you know.
And one of the things with the strategy is it's specific for on the road. And so like aviation strategies won't be addressing that. There's other programs that are out there for that. One of the things that you look at nationally, there, when you look at the pie graph, if you want to switch back to the pie graph that shows Alaska specific, when you look at the nation as a whole, 83% of the emissions come from on the road, and the rest between the rail, marine, and on road. So, or aviation, sorry, getting them flipped. But so that's where they focus this on is 83% of the nation. And so Alaska is a little bit different because we're flopped, where aviation is the large. But we need to focus the strategy on what the funds are allowed allocated for.
And so when we look at what's happening in Alaska, are we gonna take aviation, set it aside and say, okay, here's the on-road portion, that's where the strategies are and how what we're doing is moving the needle, sorts of things.
Exactly. So we'll show the context and say most of our emissions are either coming from the industry or from aviation, and where the funds are allocated, this is how it's going to benefit and how we're going to reduce.
Also then on the different types of projects, so the mass transit and active transportation, the mass transit is where the van pool and some of those things can land and be added. And let's see. And the other, as I was looking at the funding, one of the questions that I had is the 7 million, or it says after 2023, that's for the 3 years after 2023, so is that kind of?
No, that's
per year?
Yes, so DOT hasn't allocated everything. They've just identified the ones that AMATS and FAST and some of the projects that they have. So there is other funding out there. So this adds up to like 65 million and there's roughly 82 million available. And so as other projects or other sponsors come forward, then those funds can be distributed. But this is what DOT projects the funds at right now.
Okay, so we have 2022 is 3.5 million basically, right?
Yeah.
2023 is 3.7 million. After 2023 is 7.3 million annually, or 7.3 million for?
It's for the
current projects.
Current projects
Oh, I
for
see.
those 3
So
years.
more projects are going to be getting done and more money is going to be getting infused. Is there an annual allocation into the future that can be like leaned on? Like if we get more van pools, I mean, we don't want to stop them after 2 years, right?
Yeah, so the plan is going to be updated every 4 years, and then the allocation is a percentage. I can't remember where it comes from. I'd have to look at it, but as you see, 2022 and 2023, they're pretty close dollar-wise, and so you could anticipate somewhere in that ballpark going forward. And I'll look and see what the calculation comes from, and that can help you kind of know where it's coming from.
I'll note too that I've seen some folks combining funding pots, so CMAC and CRP together, and that's there's a lot in the carbon reduction program. Code of Federal Regulations and U.S. Medicare College Fund, but it outlines how you can use in combination the funding with other sources, which is seemingly.
And one question, we've got capital projects and we've got maintenance projects, right? Can this be used for maintenance or is it only capital?
So the overarching or underlying goal of this is if it reduces carbon dioxide emissions from an on-road source, then it does qualify for this funding. So whether that be maintenance and operations, and there's the whole section of construction practices as well, it does qualify for this funding.
So basically, this money could help fund our winter maintenance on our non-motorized system?
So long as it is demonstrating a carbon emission reduction. So, if you're changing out fleet or getting more people involved.
Okay, because I know that there's a lot of desire and that's raised significantly often as something that we want to be able to do. So that would be a fantastic way for some of these funds, in my opinion, to be used to help with that question. Yeah, and then more non-motorized travel, being able to have just improve non-motorized, but that winter piece. So, okay.
One more.
Okay, go ahead, Rich.
Talking about winter. I had heard, I don't know if it's true, but in the wintertime, it's the cold engine starts that really have an impact on CO2 emissions. Is that true? Oh,
No,
so I didn't know.
carbon monoxide.
I think calculating dioxide for full starts, and it was found that it's less, I won't call it negligible, but less than what had been expected.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Let's see, and what if we didn't meet the November 15th deadline?
I would defer to DOT to that. I don't know the answer to that question.
Well, I'm glad that you're on track to meet it, because I know that those deadlines are pretty critical, so. Okay, any other questions or comments from the committee? Okay, let's go to public. Any questions or comments? Let's first start with anybody in the room. Anyone in the room have a comment? Okay, go ahead, James.
Yeah, James Starzik, DOT planning again. Now, did I understand that this strategy plan is only on-road, focused on on-road? So where we have like roughly 10% of the CO2 emissions, this entire plan is just focused on the on-road, on that 10%.
The carbon reduction program, it does dictate on-road, yeah. And we, our Dallas transportation planners, which are much smarter than me at this, identified that includes AMHS, the marine highway system as well. So there's that addition, but other than that, it is.
So the marine highway system is considered on-road for the purposes of this plan.
Yes.
Okay, good to know. And then also, if AMATS is advancing projects or strategies that are not in alignment with this document, how is that a constraint on AMATS? Is AMATS obligated or constrained by the outcome of this plan?
So to a degree, yes. I don't know what the approval process for this funding is going to be. I would imagine that UPWP is going to be approving which funds can be used for which projects. That again is outside my wheelhouse expertise. But as long as it is demonstrated that there's a carbon reduction for a project, it is allowable for this funding. And the ultimate arbiter for approval, I believe, would be UPWP for that. So does it close them in? Yes, within the bounds of the program.
Well, I mean, CRP, there is federal guidance for how the MPOs can spend their CRP allocation. That's a given. But are the outcomes of the state's formal plan a constraint on how AMATS can spend this funding?
Understand. That is not the intent of the plan, and I think that these meetings are going to be beneficial to understand what the goals and objectives are of the MPOs, so that the plan can sync up with the goals and objectives of the MPOs.
And so I guess to put a pin on this, I understand the intent is to not create any constraints, but the actual outcome, if there is a consideration that the AMATS committees need to make in regards to programming via this plan, that needs to be.
And that'll help with every 4 years it'll be updated. So if there's something like that that comes up, that can help get addressed in the new plan, further revision.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks, James, for those questions and insight and comments. Okay, looks like we have another comment in the room. Go ahead.
Anna Bolton with DOT, and I would just say that there's also hoping that the nexus, if we're counting credits for e-vehicles being transitioned from the fleet that are using the surface, that it takes into account that the electricity that we use is natural gas. And so we just went through this exercise for the ferry system analysis and found out that if you're charging using a power plant that uses natural gas, there's no benefit.
That's one thing that we've been asked to look at is where the power source is coming from, so that we can at least have that discussion.
Okay, thank you, Anna. Another comment, looks like?
Yeah, I'm here on my own behalf, and
Can you state your name?
This is about.
You mind state your name real quick, please?
I'm sorry?
Did you hear the name? Could you speak up a little?
So we've established this is 10% of state carbon loading, correct? Do we know the measured outcome from that 10%? And I also see the financial pages. I see the financial pages for the project costs to the state or the government to do these things. Have the financial costs been calculated to the people you're pushing this on? I mean, the time, the cost of them for all the transitions and everything else. And I mean, just imagining 10 years down the road with these kind of things, how much time we have to spend and what kind of vehicle changes we have to make. And did anyone want this to do this? Because, you know, as we've established in many court cases, and I have about 10 of them, and I want to, freedom of travel is a constitutional right. It looks like this is an infringement on the freedom of travel and the method we so choose. I don't want to get on a bus or drive the transit. I don't want to buy anything. And I wondered how many people do want that in Anchorage. And then when you look at it's only 10% of the state's carbon loading, but what effect are we spending all this money? And overall, it is like a bug sight in a hurricane. That we're doing all of this to all the people of Anchorage and Alaska. We are a very carbon-centric place. Everything we have moves distances. Everything we do, we move ourselves distances. And it's not an easy thing to do. In our entire culture and all of our formations have been around. And by the way, we make our livelihood selling and trading carbon. This seems kind of not very in our own interest to do such things. But I did want to ask that question. I don't know, I didn't see too many bicycles or EVs out here. But I do want to ask, what is I don't see any financial costs to people of Anchorage and people of Alaska for these things. I don't see any analysis or anything stated how much we're going to have to do, how much our time is going to be wasted doing this, how much we're going to have to individually spend on these things.
Okay, thank you for the comment. Other comments from members in the room? Okay, seeing that, let's.
You have a hand up online, Mr. Goodfellow.
Hi, yes, this is Paul Goodfellow. I'm Yemi's coworker at the Department of Environmental Conservation Air Quality Division here in Anchorage. I put my hand up quickly. There was a question earlier on in regards to the state's industrial emissions. I believe it was about 45–50%. I generated the state's greenhouse gas report, which was just published a couple of weeks ago. It's available online, and it's available for the public to take a look at. We're available for questions. A good chunk of the state's industrial emissions are the result of oil and gas. So oil and gas refining and drilling both in the North Slope and in South Central Alaska on the Kenai Peninsula and in Cook Inlet. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments, Paul. Appreciate it. I also see an online comment, which I'll read into the record. DOT&F will not require AMAS to program its sub-allocation of CRP funding to conform to the plan, so long as the program is an eligible activity for CRP. The plan is to provide options and inform the data-driven investments of CRP funds. So I think that's addressing some of the questions we had. So if there's any other questions on some of these items, we can have those following the meeting. You can reach out to the staff. Thank you for your presentation, really appreciate it. What is the will of the committee? And what the request is that we review these questions, provide any recommendations to the policy committee. Is there, and I guess, it's not so, I mean, do you have thoughts on what we should be doing? I mean, it was a good presentation. I don't know what specific feedback you want us to give right now, or if it's more, this presentation is going to go to the policy committee too.
Is there time to make any changes? I think even just what Paul added, that helped answer my question, like what are the examples of industrial emissions? I think even broadening that box and say examples are.
There will be, this was the introduction, and we'll meet again.
Yeah.
And then the draft will be an opportunity for us to receive all the comments and changes.
I mean, do you need an official recommendation to the policy committee from us, or do you just want us to think about these questions and send you comments, or do they need to be take more time?
So I don't think that we need anything official, but opening up a dialogue, and if anybody has any comments along the way, this is a condensed timeline, so we're trying to facilitate good communication along the way.
Okay.
I think we'd be hard pressed to come up with something official from the AMATs in 2 weeks' time. I don't have any ability to do that.
What about the comment period? Is there an opportunity after we have a plan to review to provide comments?
So there'll be a 30-day comment period in September. So if that's enough time for AMATs to review and provide comments, then yes. If not, let us know and we can try and facilitate getting something to you sooner.
I would think we would be able to have some sort of work session on this sometime in the next month or so and kick it around and come up with some ideas. That there have been some expressed here already. That seems reasonable.
Yeah.
Up to.
So would an appropriate then motion be to consider all the comments we provided and how to incorporate them and then, present to the policy committee, so it's not necessarily anything that's getting changed? It almost seems, I guess I'm asking that, it almost seems like this is more of a project update sort of a thing where there's not necessarily a clear action item for us. But
I guess to me, there's wisdom in having staff try to schedule a work session to discuss this and kick around some ideas and see how we can answer those. That would make sense to me.
how can incorporate.
And then that you could go to the policy committee in 2 weeks and provide the same presentation and say that we pondered the idea of a work session. I'd like to give it some real thought and provide you with some good information, but I certainly can't do that. We can't do it as a group. Certainly can't provide it today because then we can't vote on it. Yeah. I'm happy to make a motion to ask staff to schedule a work session on this topic. Discuss it.
Okay. Go for it.
But later. I just did.
Okay.
Let's say that.
Motion by Mr. Lyons, seconded by Ms. Kohlhaas. Are there, and the motion is to have staff prepare a work session to be able to go and provide more specific feedback on this plan. And with regards to the policy committee, is there anything that's part of that in your motion? Just that.
I guess I would assume that the work session would invite the policy committee as well. We could all be in the room and we could come up with some thoughts. They're the ones who vote on the final decision of the minutes anyway, so.
Okay. Sounds good. Does that sound good to you, Linda?
Yes.
Okay. Perfect. So we have a motion before us. Are there any objections to the motion? Okay, seeing none, the motion is approved. So thank you so much for your presentation and information.
There is a comment by Mr. Goodfellow here online.
Okay, I would encourage everyone to review the state's GHG inventory as there's technical details which may answer some questions next year. So that would be also something that'd be great to be part of that work session. Be able to take a look at both of those. So, okay, let's move on then to the project and plan updates portion of our agenda. And item 6A is the MTP update. Are we ready to have that? Is that yours, John?
It's not mine, but I think we're ready to have it. My colleague is Lord Lawler is here, Chelsea, to present that information.
Thanks, John. Good afternoon, everybody. Just wanted to provide a brief update on the MTP, which is our Metropolitan Transportation Plan. We are working on the 2050 MTP right now. It is currently going through graphic design, and we very much hope to have a public involvement period starting August 1st. We're looking at a 60-day public involvement period, assuming everything between now and then lines up well. That might get pushed a little bit, but we're looking at 2 public workshops during that time, one in Anchorage, one in Eagle River. And then a third one that would be virtual, to provide lots of different opportunities for folks to participate in a workshop setting. And then of course, as well, they could always review online and participate that way. This will also be the time when we would have a public hearing with the assembly on the plan. We would present to the AMATS committees, the subcommittees, not necessarily the technical advisory and policy committee. We would present to the Federation of Community Councils, other organizations that request presentations during the public involvement period. We would have our tribal consultation. We would do our resource agency review. And then after that public involvement period for 60 days, we would hopefully, while that's happening, be working on our comment response, and then quickly have a joint technical advisory and policy committee work session on the public comment review. And then you all would be given the opportunity to provide feedback on those comments and what changes we should be making before going through to the final plan, whether that's, you know, if we need to look at another alternative or whatever else might happen after that time. And then there's like another 6 months of the plan going through the various processes from there, even after we look at the final draft before it goes for final approval, which we're aiming for. I think it has to be approved by next August, if I remember correctly. So hopefully we've built in some buffer time in case some of those timelines get adjusted. But ultimately, yeah, just looking at our upcoming public involvement period, would love for you all to take a look at that draft document when it comes out. Comments that we receive after the public comment period is closed.
Okay, thanks, Jesse. Any questions or comments from the committee?
A question, just because I'm not familiar with how often is it updated?
Yeah, every 4 years.
Every 4 years.
Other questions, comments? I'm curious on the public involvement side, if, you know, as we're talking about work session on this other plan, we just think, are work sessions kind of envisioned to be part of that coming to our committee as we look at, I know what always has a lot of information in the MTP.
Yeah, so I think the goal is to, you know, remind you all probably next month when the plan is out, that you could take a look at it, but then rather than taking up too much committee meeting time or too many work sessions, really wait until we have some recommendations based on the public comment period to bring the full plan document to you, and also talk about what changes we would recommend or that have been recommended based on that public comment period. So trying to reduce the pressure on you all to, you know, have too much time on this document, but also provide opportunity for your input, of course. And so I think we're aiming for October for that, knowing that, you know, once things happen in November and December, life is crazy for everybody. So we're going to do our best to be really efficient during that public involvement period so that we can get everybody together as soon as possible afterwards.
Sounds good. So maybe more individual feedback on the first public involvement phase, and then sessions and whatnot and involved.
Yeah, of course, you're always welcome to provide feedback during the public involvement period individually rather than the committee feedback.
Okay, sounds great.
And I'd be happy to meet individually with folks as much as needed.
Okay, perfect. Any other questions or comments from the committee? Are there any comments from the public on this item? Okay, let's see any hands or anybody online. Okay, let's move on. Thank you, Chelsea, for that. Let's move on to item 6B, the pilot of protected bike lanes in Anchorage. And Anna, are you going to be taking that?
Yeah, where would you like me to, can I just yell?
You can project from there if you'd like. I think that works great.
All right, thank you. Yeah, Anna Boson from DOT. We also have Colin Singleton from CRW Engineering Group here to present on this project. We have a one-page document. I don't know if someone can pull it up for the folks online to share the screen. It's not really a formal presentation. It's just a way of sharing some information on the project that is happening here in Anchorage. Yeah.
That's the website. We're looking to see. I know that we printed off Conference, I think, off for us.
There's a website, but if you can get to the website.
It's not on the website, that's just our project.
I'll take that.
If I forwarded it to you, Christine and Brianna, then we could be able to put it on. I know that it came to us.
So while you guys are pulling that up, I'll, for those of you in the room, it's just a one-page brief description of the project. This is not funded through AMAPS, but this is still within Anchorage municipality, and we thought it was a good opportunity to share with you an innovative research project that's going on. So the background on this project is this is a community-led initiative project where the city approached the DOT learning about some new funding opportunities from the bipartisan infrastructure law passed in 2021 that made complete streets opportunities, projects in the planning department phase of project development eligible for 100% federal participation. And so the Research Advisory Board approved a scope of piloting protected bike lanes in several different scenarios around Anchorage back in March of 2023. And so we hired CRW Engineering Group with Huddle and Kittleson to create a plan for various scenarios of these to be deployed around Anchorage over a 2-year period. And this has been tried around the country for piloting various scenarios before investing in a major construction project. This is a temporary installation that would happen. We would remove them afterwards. We will instrument and collect data and survey the public about them. This is a low-cost option to try reallocation of right-of-way space. And so the first location is scheduled to be on Pine and McCary Streets in Mountain View and Russian Jack neighborhood. And where there's already a bike lane striped there, so it's actually just shifting the bike lane to a different orientation to offer positive protection to riders. So it's actually not taking any space away from parking, it's not taking any space away from the traveling public. It's just flipping the orientation and offering some positive protection for the riders to see if that low-cost switch is something that would improve comfort, rideability, and improve the safety in the neighborhood as well. And then next summer, we're looking at other locations around downtown Anchorage. And so we'll learn from this summer's installation and analyze the data to have a more robust pilot for the summertime next year. So happy to take any questions. Wanted just to really give kind of an update on it. If you have any questions that you think of afterwards or comments, you're welcome to reach me. And I do have my contact information in the link provided at the top of the page. You can find out more about our program. If you have other research ideas and needs for not just Anchorage, but Alaska in general, I'm happy to take those. I manage the research program for DOT, and we can study anything surface transportation related.
Okay, thanks, Anna. And I tried to send it, but it kicked it back. So we'll provide it to you later and maybe make it available another way for those online. So apologize for those online who aren't able to see it. But do we have any questions or comments from the committee? You've got the handout in front of you. Go ahead, Steve.
So I think that stretch on Pine Street, McCary bike lanes were added just a couple years ago. And do we have data from before those bike lanes went in? This interesting opportunity to do not just a pilot and existing, but even before. And so I'm wondering if that information is available either through traffic department or whoever had put the project together before. And if that would lend a little bit more data to, it could help inform patterns.
Yeah, I can speak to that. Paul Singleton, Cyril, I'm heading up the consultancy. There is data that was there, I think in 2015, soon before the project went, didn't include or break out. I'm speaking a little from the hip here. The breakout of different modes of users, that may be limited in that information, but we definitely have things like vehicle volumes and speeds, and simply looking at things from a speed perspective is one way to evaluate the global safety of that corridor. Definitely, the more vertical separation there is, and the first project, as you mentioned, already decreased the width of those lanes. That could have an effect, and these vertical separations could have an additional effect. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mayor DeVries asked.
Hold on, yeah, I think they have a formal, they go to the committee first, and then they'll open it up to the public.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the committee? Okay, go ahead.
Mayor DeVries asked me to ask you if I could with you folks about, you can see the extreme reduction in carbon that would be allotted by building the Phoenix Farm Bridge, and she asked about that going forward now, considering trying to reduce carbon.
Okay.
And increase the available low-cost housing for the problems we have here. Is that
His name?
still considerations?
From the DOT perspective, I can't speak to if we're gonna restart that project up. Pretty sure it's not, it's closed down. So in order to research a new project that probably doesn't have any viability in the near future is probably not gonna happen.
More impact than anything we've heard today.
Okay, so I think also our secretary has a question about your name. So if you wouldn't mind after the meeting, just help me in here so that she can write down your name, that would be great. Does that work? Okay, perfect. Any other questions or comments from members of the public? Do we have anybody online that has questions? Perfect. Well, thank you, Anna. Thank you, Colin, for coming and for giving the update. It is a project that I'm also heavily involved in, so if anyone does have questions, you can reach out to us afterwards. I'd be happy to talk about it too. Okay, so looking at next items on our agenda, we are now moving into the general information. Item 7. Is there any general information to pass along, John?
Yeah, if I would, for just a second. So currently, the UMed Transportation Demand Management Study is coming to a conclusion, and presently we're in the 30-day public comment period, which ends July 25th. So I encourage both the committee, members of the public that are interested to go online and www.destinationumed.com and check out the final products and comment on them if they like. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, John. Anything else on general information?
Don't think I have anything else.
Okay, then moving on to committee comments. Any comments from members of the committee for the group today? One of the comments that I'll make is that traffic engineering has a new staff member, Zach Hartman, who's actually here. He is our new traffic calming pedestrian bicycle coordinator. So we're really excited for that additional staff person. It's amazing how much having one more person helps. So I'm super excited about that. It's been super early for me, and Zach's amazing. So if you have anything you want to ask about on those 3 elements, traffic calming, pedestrian bicycle, feel free to reach out to Zach. And the other thing I want to provide is that last month, after our last month's meeting, one of my staff members, Eric Armagast, was awarded an Employee of the Year for the municipality for 2022. So he also does a lot in helping APD and the community. If we've got an incident at an intersection, providing video footage, and when there's crashes and whatnot, he's done a lot of great work running our signal system. So kudos to Eric. Just wanted to give a shout out to my amazing staff. So other comments? I guess any comments? Go ahead, Melinda.
I just wanted to inform that PM&E has a new project database. It's a better public interface that is it's not only web-based, but GIS-based. And you can find it on our PM&E homepage. So that just went live a couple weeks ago. So it may take a little time to adjust to it, and we're still filling it out now that it's a new tool to us, but I do believe it's going to be a good tool for the public to learn more about our project status.
Okay, thank you, Melinda. Go ahead, Steve.
The Northeast Connector Trail is now done. This is an AMAT project about 5 years ago, and so the project's complete. We're going to have a ribbon cutting on the 26th, Wednesday at 4 o'clock. And I'm working with AMAT staff to get a flyer out there and an event created, and I hope everyone can come and enjoy.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I was excited to have new projects. Thank you, Steve. Other committee comments? Okay, next item then is public comments. Is there any member of the public who'd like to take 3 minutes to provide a comment generally to the group? Okay, nobody online, no one in the room. So we are now adjourned. 3:42.